Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have the final session of the day, the panel discussion. We have on stage your moderator, Michael Cornelius, Director of MSTB, and the panelists, John Hager, System Software Engineer and Tester Consultant, Grand Software Testing, US. Mr. Graham Barth, Principal Consultant, T-Systems, Germany. Maaike Gevers, Board Member, Belgium and Netherlands Testing Qualifications Board. And Professor Robin Poston, Chair, Department of Business Information and Technology, University of Memphis, USA. I'll hand you over now to your moderator, Mr. Michael Cornelius.
Thank you. A slight correction. Robin is not here today. We have her boss, which is Jasper Dallywell. So he's not the nice one in the skirt, he's the ugly one in the trousers. I'm sorry about that. Welcome. As you heard, my name is Mike Cornelius. I'm with MSTB, and I'm delighted to welcome you to not only SoftTech 2016, but this, the final panel session of the conference. Oh. The title is Software Testing as a Service. Now, most of us, I think, will have heard this term, and for many of us, it's synonymous with outsourcing. Now, perhaps I'm most familiar with it when it's outsourcing with regard to a specific specialization, like performance testing or security testing or Oracle or ERP testing. But I suppose I have a very small view of it. I don't have much exposure to it myself. And people also talk of it as on-demand testing, which is a concept I really can't get my head around. But fortunately, we do have 4 experts here. Now, outsourcing, if you talk to a business manager, it's something which makes their ears perk up. Because outsourcing, in most people's minds, equals cheap or cheaper. Or it may be cheaper and better, or it may be cheaper, better and quicker, or it may be cheaper, better, quicker and simpler. But for many companies who've outsourced over the last 20 years, they're beginning to understand that that isn't necessarily true. And I'm sure these guys will tell you that outsourcing shouldn't be done purely for cheapness. But for many of you here, you'll either work for the government, big companies, or our burgeoning software test sector. So outsourcing will have a different impact, either positive or, for some, negative, because your jobs will be outsourced. So what I'm going to do today is ask all of our panel in turn to give their view. And they may have some completely different view of what TAAS is, Testing as a Service, and to raise, or give their view on the issue and to raise points, ask questions, and sort of debate with their fellow panelists. But what I would also like to do is encourage some interaction from the floor. Now, typically, I would ask for questions, but somebody pointed out to me that you may not have a question, but you may have an experience or a view you want to share. So, by all means, you shout, and, well, actually, wave your hand. Let me know that you have a point to raise, and I will ask. Okay? So, in turn, I'm going to go through all of these 4 ladies and gentlemen and ask them to give a 5 or 10 minute statement or comment on testing as a service, and then invite some debate from yourselves and from the other panelists. I do apologise for sort of my hesitance in talking, but I'm getting terrible feedback from this mic, and it's a bit like having 2 different people talking to me, so I don't know whether we can turn it down a little bit or something, please. But anyway, while that's being sorted out, let me invite Graham to start the ball rolling, and I think you've got a few slides for us.
I just happen to have a few slides up my sleeve. This is just to get the ball rolling in your heads, okay, about TAAS. And just before we start, maybe, Mike, TAAS and offshoring They're not the same. It's not the same kind of thing. TAS is a concept, and where we are, we've applied it for customers, and some of those customers have used it internally, not in an offshoring situation. So maybe the discussion about TAS and offshoring, we need to structure that conversation a bit. Anyway, what's TAS? Now, basically, what you have to think about with TAS is think about your testing. Package your testing into things that you can offer people. Okay? What kinds of things can we offer to people? Well, test design, test management, perhaps. We can offer them test automation, or we can offer them security testing. Those are the things that you're good at, and you can offer those to others. Those others could be customers of yours. They could be divisions of your own company. Now, the diagram I've got here sort of shows you what the structure of a so-called service package is. And this is what we developed for a customer of ours in Munich that makes motor cars. And they do this. So this isn't just sort of theory. This is in practice. All right? So what we do is develop a so-called service catalogue, and it's made up of the things that actually the customer wanted from us, things that they wanted packaged. And it has a description, it has entry criteria, which means, dear customer, you have to fulfill these entry criteria to enable you to use this package. It has different elements, like, well, an element might be test design, might be test execution, and so on. And it has a quick scan list, which is something that you go through with the customer to make sure they're ready, and a calculation model where we bury all of our secret production statistics so that we can calculate the price. So that's basically the structure. And you make all of these packages up, you draw them up, you work them all out, and you present this to a customer just like you would present a menu to somebody in a restaurant. What would you like? Okay, so the customer will sit there and say, well, I'd like 1 package of test design, 3 packages of test execution. Throw in a test management package, and then you'll say, oh wait, if you order 5 of these packages, you get the test management free, and all this kind of supermarket style stuff. And you basically capture your testing service in a description like this, and you build it up. There's a typical test execution content. It consists of, we will execute 100 standard test cases for you. What's a standard test case? You have to define that, okay? It could be 10 complex ones, it could be 100 simple ones, whatever. You define that in your package, and you say, that's the effort, this is your price. So the idea of TAS is that once you've set up your menu, once you've set up the things that you want to give to people, you put them on offer, then you just say, well, okay, it's pay per use. You order that from us. If you want 3 of these, you get them, you use them, they're done. There's a defined outcome for the package. If you want to order another 3, that's okay. What we don't do very, very well is if a customer comes along and says, I would like 1, because, you know, there is a ramp up involved in learning how the customer works and so on. So it only works really very well if you've got some continuation. If they order sort of like 10 or 20 or 30 packages from you from the menu. But it seems it would be wrong for me to suggest that it works just great. There are things that are not quite so good. Maybe we'll touch upon those in the panel. But there we are. That's the basic elements of your catalogue. That would be an example of your catalogue with the various packages in, system testing for particular applications, performance, functional testing, and so on. And your service catalogue will look different according to what you do best. Okay. And once again, this can work internally. So the customer of mine that we introduced this to did this internally. So they set up an internal testing organization and they offered this package to their projects in their company. Because those projects were small, they didn't want testing all the time. So they just said, okay, we'll order from you, from our internal testing organization, these things, you come, do it, deliver, and go. It's pay per use. That's an interesting concept. And if you design the packages well, it can work. We've shown that it can work, but it's not always straightforward introducing it. So there we are. What you get, more flexibility, better control over your costs, which is why I just mentioned it earlier in the ROI discussion. You order what you want and when you want it. So you don't have this problem with, ROI, I've got to do this all up front and everything. You can work it out as you're going along. Can we afford 2 or 3 more packages of testing? Do we need it? And so on. You can decide as you're going along. So it's service-oriented, and you order what you want when you want it. And that is a major challenge to get that. But those are the advantages. And with that, we'll come back to the awestruck panel.
Thank you, Graham. An interesting presentation. It immediately brings up about 4 million questions from me. But one point I will pick up is I mentioned outsourcing, you mentioned offshoring. And they are different concepts. And,
yes, of course. Okay.
And I think right now we're hoping people might offshore to us eventually in Malaysia, but that may be a good thing. Okay. Is there any comment immediately from the panel? Any violent disagreement or indeed from the floor, please? And I haven't got my glasses on, so you have to sort of wave your hands quite violently.
Well, maybe you can need my glasses, but I need them too. So, first of all, if I was looking about tasks or testing as a service, the first thing what we do is we Google. So the landing page I came up was the Albuquerque Astronomical Society. So, okay, that's the abbreviation. I hope their website is going to be standing on hold when people are Googling it. Now, to me, testing as a service is a kind of outsourcing model. It's a framework. It's an on-demand testing where you ask for specific skill sets, tools, or money, budget-wise, that you want to avoid. So, for example, if you're looking to the skills, what was on your slides, like specific test automation, you need expensive tools for it. If you're looking to performance testing, you need the skill set, you need tools, you need the cloud, and so on. Now, outsourcing and offshoring, I'm thinking always, is this a myth or reality? In the past, we were saying like, okay, we are going to outsource it, but it was immediately offshoring. So from the European perspective, we were always looking, okay, it's been outsourced, it's going to India, Philippines, Malaysia, Brazil, South Africa, where the level of knowledge is high, people speak English, and they have the skill set that we're looking for. Currently, outsourcing is not necessarily offshoring anymore. It can be, as Graham said, it can be outsourced internally to a department. It can be outsourced to a specific person or a specific company that has that skill set and that speciality. Now, looking to the Internet of Things, what we've seen these days, it's get so vast, so rapidly, and we are getting in a niche. So my guess is that outsourcing and offshoring is going to be in the lift.
Okay. Pass over to Jasbir.
Okay, I'll take a little bit of an academic perspective to this. The first academic paper on testing as a service was published by one of our PhD students. Her name was Yang. She works for Microsoft now in Seattle, helping Microsoft apply testing as a service concepts. The paper actually was published, the early work started about 2008, and then she presented at the two main academic research conferences, which is, I think some of you may have heard of ICST, which is held every year in different parts of the world, and she presented those concepts there at the same time presented at ISRI, where all the reliability engineers, the two main academic research conferences in software testing. Subsequently, after many rounds of review, that paper was published in a journal called E-Services Journal, which comes out of Nebraska in Omaha. So you may wonder, I think it was published in winter 2011, so it takes 3 years to publish a paper. And essentially, she would argue that testing as a service is a way of looking at the world. It's a paradigm, it's a mind shift. And so one of the ways she compartmentalizes says, for testing to be a service, you have to look at 3 different dimensions. One is, and she relates service to value add. The first service or value add is, what's the service testers provide to developers? Because ultimately, developers are here to testers are there to provide a feedback loop, a service that makes developers better. And then let's quantify that. The second category of services that testers provide is to the software itself. It makes the software better in terms of functionality and some of the things that Graham nicely put up on the chart just now. Now, the third service that testers provide is to the end user in terms of certification and assurance. So that's a very nice framework she has in that paper that breaks it down into 3 different levels. Now, she also separates service from self-service. So self-service is a more sophisticated concept than testing as a service. And so as a matter of fact, FedEx took a lot of these ideas and implemented it in-house, and that's where I think Graham really hit it on the head, and that a service-oriented, testing as a service doesn't necessarily have to apply to outsourcing at all. Even though subsequently to this academic work that she published, the outsourcing companies in India and other places just completely took those concepts and just turned them over their head and started selling them as a service. And now, the other thing I want to emphasize is, if you take a very service orientation to testing, a few things happen. The first thing is the relationship developers will have with testers will change. Once the developers understand that the testers are providing a service, right, rather than pointing out the defects to them, the relationship changes in that sense. So that's a new type of relationship that is fostered. The second thing is it leads to a whole bunch more measurements. Historically, we haven't measured well the service that testers provide to end users or developers or even to the product itself. But having a service orientation leads to a lot more measurement. And the third dimension of testing as a service is it represents a change in culture. Once you organize your testing group as a service, there's a cultural change for the tester to be a service provider. And now the fourth thing is a lot of large organizations are interested in chargeback systems. That means the cost that you spend on testing has to be charged back somewhere. And like for example, when you have a service contract, the first thing you have to talk about is service level agreements, right? You can't have a service without service level agreements between the two parties. And then the question will be, those service level agreements have to be made based on some measurements, of effort and other kinds of things. So chargeback systems, so essentially it leads to new service level agreements and new service guarantees that the testers can provide. Now, the last concept is really going back to this notion of self-service, and that's where the whole concept of the testing center of excellence comes out. Like, for example, at FedEx, they took all their automated testing tools, put them all online, and made them available to all the development teams right across the world, and said, for test automation, it is available on demand as a service. So that's the first thing that they transformed. And really, the main benefit they found there was demand management. Once you are paying variable costs for a service, right, you tend to be very careful about how much you use it in some. Before that, it was a free good, in the larger organizations. So that's again, it's a little bit academic, but that's how this PhD student of mine, she viewed testing as a service from a very academic perspective.
John.
Testing as a service, yes.
To be continued.
I can ask you a question. Now, one thing I did want to ask actually the audience here is, how many people here actually have any experience either on the giving or the receiving end of testing as a service, or testing shared services, or whatever? Is it young lady at the front here?
Two.
Where's the other one? They're not waving fast enough. I can't. Well, I was going to ask, would you feel comfortable just giving a few comments to the team here about your experiences testing as a service? Sorry to pick on you, but no, please do.
Okay, hi, I'm Christina. I'm from Shell. Just share a bit. Basically, we are using the service, mean that we are not managing the tester by ourselves. So-called that I'm the test manager, or receiving the demand from the internal within Shell, especially for upstream, and then we transferred into this test service provider, so-called, in India, and basically we are pay-per-use as well. So in terms of the managing the resources, it will be easier, but yes, there is a drawback, whereby the knowledge is unable to control within us. We need to have a lot of measurement, and even the quality, sometimes we also need to double check, recheck, and then validate. So kind of a concrete and then a solid measurement is very needed. But in terms of the cost, etc., it is more easier to manage.
Okay, but generally your experience, is it?
I can say pro cons. A good thing is that much more faster, means that I did not need to consider whether I have in-house resource or not. I just throw the demands, and then asking them to arrange the timing as long as it is met the target and the timeline, the budget, and then they deliver the service. That's the good things. The drawback is, yes, the knowledge. We are unable to retain, whereby now we consider to have a so-called test analyst reflect back to the your so-called responsibility and task. We want to have the in-house test analyst, but the tester or the executor is the outsource or offshore to India.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Was there another person here who had experience? Sorry, I can't see any hand.
They're not putting their hand up.
They're not putting their hand up now. Thank you for that. That's very useful. Now, I think you raised, for me, I mean, if you come from a software development world where you have outsourced software development or shared service, in some ways it works fine, but you always have the issue of scheduling, demand, availability, the right people, because testing, like software development, isn't just a numbers game, it's a skill and individuals game. How do companies, clearly there's a big potential here for testing as a service, how do these companies then start the process of moving from having, would you call them dedicated testers, testers dedicated to each project, to having a more shared service approach? How would they go about that? And should they go about that?
If you're transforming your organization from, let's call it a traditional one, to I also have a slide for this, but it's going to get boring if I just keep jumping up and showing slides. This is probably the most difficult thing about testing as a service, is actually transforming your organization to be able to provide it. So basically, you have to have a model, a model that enables the organization to transform from where it is now to a pay-per-use organization. And there's a big cultural change required to do that. Because you may be providing things on a fixed price basis at the moment or whatever, and you've got to go to pay-per-use with all, as you say, with all of the capacity planning issues associated with that. So I mean, for me, that's the biggest part. Actually defining your menu is probably the easy bit. Getting your organization or somebody else's organization in a position where they can deliver is the difficult bit, because that means changing the way people work, changing the way you do business. It means you have to have a solution for peaks and troughs. It means that you have to have agreements in place so that you protect yourself from customers that supply you with bad quality, basically. You have all of these considerations to take into account. Perhaps I could share with you one interesting point, is that because of the pricing model that you use with testing as a service, it does actually encourage the people that are using their service to respect their end of the deal as well. So in other words, if you are selling to external customers, then they will get a different price for delivering you good specifications compared to delivering you rubbish specifications. So in other words, they will pay more depending upon what the quality of their input, their part of the bargain is. So it encourages, there's a positive encouragement in there for customers of TAS to improve the quality of their part of the deal. And that's quite a useful side effect of that concept. I've rambled on a bit there.
Oh, that's fine.
I hope that's addressed more or less what you wanted to
Okay. Now I'm going to
about.
ask... No, go on. Sorry.
I want to reinforce what Graham said is, and also relate to what outsourcing that was pointed out earlier. If you're a large organization and currently you don't outsource your testing and you want to, the best place you can start is to start taking a service orientation internally yourself, because it prepares you, because when you're going to outsource to a third party, the first thing they're going to ask you is, what service levels do you want? And that's the point I think Graham was trying to make. And if you haven't even thought about what service levels you want, you're going to get yourself into a bad contract. Same thing, if you want to provide outsourced testing services to the rest of the world, here in Malaysia, you better think about the service orientation, because at the end of the day, outsourcing contracts are all about service level. Remember, service level guarantees, service level agreements, and if you haven't even thought about it in those terms, so to get into outsourcing, the testing as a service model is a great preparatory ground. I think that's the point you made, Graham. Yeah.
Okay, I got a little, story to tell. I was at a conference beginning of this year, and one of the speakers was the CIO of a major assurance company in France. And he mentioned that he was going to restructure his whole IT department. So of course there were some of his guys into the audience, and I think they fell all from their chair. But the point is this is a traditional, developing life cycle with the V model, and we were thinking, okay, he's going to move this to Agile, which was the obvious choice. It was not only going to move this to Agile. So in each of the products in insurance, like insurance policy, a lot of people were working together. Now what he was going to do is each of the product that they have will have a product owner, will have an Agile team, complete with developers, testers, and so on. But he made this as a kind of a vertical. So each of the product line will have a vertical, but the people will come from the horizontal. That means they have a pool of developers, a pool of testers, a pool of specialists, a pool of designers, and depending on the project, they will pull out the people out of those pools, and they will stay into this vertical for a couple of years, depending on how the product will evolve. So this is a kind of service internally. So the horizontal will provide the services to the verticals, as a service level. Yes.
Now, sorry, I was just going to ask you something before you speak, because I was going to ask you, John.
No.
Jasper made a point that his student came up with the idea, and it was jumped upon by all of the outsourced service providers and the offshore service providers as a good idea, which implies there's an industry push. Is there a corresponding industry demand for this, or is it just another thing that the industry is going around trying to sell off?
So a couple of stories that kind of go to that point. One a success, one maybe not so. I'll start with the not so. The company, I won't name them or what they do, but they were not skilled in software. They were not skilled in software testing. So, but they wanted to start doing software, IoT kind of problem that many companies are going to face. So they first outsourced their software development, software as a service. Then some way mid through that whole thing, they realized they didn't have the ability to assess the software they were getting. And so they started looking around for something, might call it testing as a service. They struggled once. I came in when they were struggling twice, made recommendations. As far as I know, they were still struggling. And my suspicion relates to the second story. But they were not successful in doing outsourcing. Software maybe was okay, but the testing, not so much. The other one was one I was directly involved in, where a customer, stakeholder, didn't have the knowledge to do the testing, so they outsourced both the development and the software, like the first story, but the testing as a service that they hired was essentially another company that was able to almost do what the first company did. They had experience, knowledge, skills, and they were successful. So to the question of, what should Malaysian companies or any company do for outsourcing as you move into that, for me the message of that is you do have to have the skilled people somehow or another from the get-go. All the things you two were talking about are all true. You need all those things. But if you can't actually provide the service, I think you have a fundamental problem. Then the question becomes, how do you get those skills? And that's a hard thing to do when you're setting these companies up. I have seen it work. I've also seen it fail. One of the things I think we see with some of the outsourcing, offshoring, testing as a service companies is they come in with just checkers. I'm not sure they're good testers. And you get what you pay for. And so those are my stories in a slightly longer topic.
Just picking up on that point, you talk about tester skill. Does it require a different set of skills? If you're having a test as a service operation, does it require additional skill or additional knowledge? There should be a...
I'll say, for the tester themselves, I might say not entirely. The place I think the other skills come in is the things that were being talked about in the management and setting up the service agreements and the logistics management side of it. And you need both parts. You could have really skilled testers, but none of that other stuff. I think you probably won't succeed. You can have all that other stuff, but people don't know what they're doing on the actual service that people want. I think the first story I told looked like it kind of failed there for them. They may yet be successful, but they were, as 6 months ago, still struggling.
I would underscore that. I wanted to come back to a point that you made earlier about the demand side. And I think that we as an industry are very good at hyping things, aren't we? Like, next year we're all going to be doing TIAS, or we're all going to be doing that. That's not true. The demand is, from my experience, driven by giving customers an option, an extra option to what they do now. So it's not like saying, you know, in the future your way of testing is all going to be TIAS driven. It's not. But people like yourselves have got to go into your organizations and say to people, or if you like, trigger situations where you say, that would be a good application for TIAS. Maybe we could do that. And that will provide the options which might result in adoption. So I don't think that the industry can drive that. I think that it's actually up to you guys and us to make people aware of what their options are. And TIAS is a new, flexible way of acquiring testing, pay-per-use basis. If that's what you want, that gives you that option.
But it's not necessarily an all or nothing.
No, you can mix it, definitely. You might decide, and this is a good example of, I did this for a company that developed TIAS internally, and they did it in stages. And the first thing they provided as a service was test management. So the package was test plan. We will come to your project and develop with you a test plan. At the end of it, you get a test plan that suits your project, and we say goodbye. Another part of the test management package was defect management. Another package element was reporting. So all of if you can imagine that you've got somebody looking after this stuff and you're ordering this stuff from your menu, we developed the test management side at first because actually it was easier. And once we got the idea flying in the stage 2, we said, okay, what could we do now? We could, and they looked actually at test automation as an obvious choice, as you mentioned, and a couple of other things with test design to help projects. It's actually because the projects just need support. They need somebody to come along, do a job for them, and go, and then they're okay. Then they're thanks for the design, or thanks for the test management strategy. Good, we can run with that. So it's sort of like a mix, as you say. It's sort of, some of it is just a package, in and out, and some of it is traditional testing as before.
Now, I say we, some of us have spoken quite a lot already. Any questions from the floor? Any comments from the floor? And you have to wave your hands briskly. I can't. It's very... Oh, there's a gentleman.
Right.
if you could just introduce yourself and make your comments, please.
Hello, hey, I'm Danny. I'm actually from a company that we provide testing as a service. So our testing actually focus on the quality aspect. We do quality assurance. We check. We work with teams, agile teams together. So one thing we noticed that is when we engage with clients, we do have to work together with them quite a lot. We have to send our mans into their agile team sometimes. We do test plans. We also look at the quality of any output they have. So one thing we notice is there's actually not much company that is taking up this kind of services. We do have clients from Europe and also Hong Kong's. But I think beside that, there's not much uptake of these kind of services. Locally, there are some, but there are only a few. So I would like to see what's your opinion on this, because we don't do traditional testing. We only focus on the quality aspect and the quality assurance, mostly on the usabilities and the user experience on that part. So I would like to hear your experience on that.
That's excellent. Thank you.
So I think you actually kind of bring up an interesting point that's occurred to me, and the way I would phrase it is maybe in testing as a service, we saw presentations where we were outlining qualities and return on investment, and maybe some of the general aspects of testing, the developing organization maybe should continue to hold. But such things as security testing, if that's an issue, some of the other quality areas, then my experience are very hard to do, maybe requiring special knowledge, experience, skills, tools, should be the kind of thing that testing as a service providers should kind of, I'll say, provide on demand. The analogy I would use, when I'm at home, I have a car, I drive my car all the time. When I'm out traveling on the road, I hire a taxi often. Sometimes I rent a car. So the service that I'm getting very much depends upon the conditions that I'm in. Am I at home? Familiar things? Am I in a place like India, where I would never drive a car personally? Wouldn't even think about it. Malaysia, I would think about it, but a lot of times I'm right here near the hotel. All I need is a taxi to get back and from the airport. So it's the kind of thing where the conditions and what it is I'm looking for maybe should determine the testing as a service. So when I'm looking for something specialized, say like security, maybe that's what we should be recommending to companies around the world, certainly in Malaysia. That's what you want to develop, because as you observed, and I've seen it in people I've talked to, there was a big push back 10 years ago, and a lot of companies in India set up on it. But I've known some friends of mine that pulled that back for a variety of reasons that we've mentioned here. Maybe security should be something, as one example.
Yes, but the menu's got to look attractive, and if you like, has to actually. You have to get an appetite from looking at the menu. You know what I mean? So I mean the demand, again, to address maybe your point, it's up to us to tell or to make known to all those customers out there what they can get. And to a degree, a lot of customers will say, okay, that's interesting, but no thank you. But there may be some customers out there that would say, hey, that's a solution to the problem, but they don't know that it's a solution to the problem. So I guess that it's making it known that they can go that way. Perhaps a form of advertising or a form of raising awareness for the option. And then you'll see people adopting it. If the menu provides satisfies the hunger, let's say. Stretching this analogy a little bit far, but you know what I mean. And so you would see, I think that security testing is a no-brainer. I mean, people will want that kind of service. Performance testing is another one. So a lot of this quality attribute stuff, reliability testing, perhaps automation. There are a lot of standard ones out there as well, like test management, which, believe it or not many people are really good at. They might find it attractive to get somebody in and do the job. It's not body shopping. It's not hiring a guy to come and do it. It's a defined package of work. And that might be attractive, but I think that we have to raise the appetite a little bit.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Mika.
Yeah, something that I want to add, and also what has been said, is about changing the mentality between the different departments, between developers and testers. So if you bring another company inside, or another person inside your company with a specialist skill set, it changes the way things go around. You get much more credibility inside a company when, for example, when I'm coming in as an expert into an organization, even though I'm a woman, and in Europe, there are not a lot of women in IT. I see here that's the reverse, so that's really good. But you change the dynamics into an organization which benefits the whole project from.
Okay, now we're just about out of time, so I'm going to ask each of you just to give one sentence of advice to the people here, either for people who want to start offering these services, or maybe even people who might want to start buying these services. What is the one thing they should concentrate on? One or two sentences, please. Go on, John. You're the expert. 2 sentences, okay.
Build skills.
2 words.
The hardest thing to do when you take a service approach to testing is to come up with the service options. I think Graham called it the menu. My suggestion, don't try to do it yourself. Get some real experts in the industry, to come in and define those service options for you. 2, the service approach to testing is going to require a lot more measurements of the service. Testing as a service is the biggest driver for metrics into testing. So like, for example, all the different types of coverages, requirements coverage, function point coverage, logic coverage. Testing as a service is actually the mechanism by which these things get into actual contracts. So be aware of that. It's going to bring a lot more measurement into your testing. And if that's not what you want, then don't look at testing as a service. I think those are 2 points.
That was a very long sentence.
Okay, I was thinking about being genuine. Secondly is deliver what you promise. And thirdly is if you notice that something goes wrong, tell it. Go by your gut's feeling and tell it as soon as possible.
I would give you the advice, try it in your own organizations. Start with something simple that's going to be easy. Prototype it, find out how it works, and last sentence perhaps, remember the people issues. Remember that changing your organization into one that can deliver testing as a service is not a small activity, so focus on that right from the beginning.
Thank you. Right. Thank you for your time and attention and your questions, excellent questions. I'd like to thank John, Jasper, Mika and Graham for their wit and wisdom. If I can ask you to give them a round of applause. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists and moderator.